Hey friends, it's Carl again with Calm Survival. Today we're going to break down some things that may help you find some perspective within the crisis. It doesn't really matter what the crisis is. As of this recording, near the end of March, there's a pretty big crisis happening. Now, this may be the first crisis you've had to deal with at the time you listen to this, maybe the last time someone else handled the main part of it. It doesn't really matter what the crisis is. We can only compare what's happened to us with our own experience. If I say the worst thing that happened to me, and you say the worst thing that happened to you, it quickly turns into just one-upsmanship, and that doesn't help either of us. Because as we look back on our lives, that worst thing, it might change. Our perspective on it may shift. That thing that seemed like the worst thing at the time may have opened new opportunities for us. It's not a matter of scale. It's simply a matter of learning from our past experiences. So no matter what it feels like, everyone has had to learn this. So it's just a matter of taking in the information, learning, and adapting. When we look at the crisis, we can start with a pretty simple set of guidelines. First rule for every first aid class and situation is, are you in danger? If you're in danger right now, you probably should be doing something else. Let's assume for the moment you're not in danger. We have the rule of threes. 3 minutes without air. Reality is that humans get pretty non-functional before the 3 minute mark, but we don't have to worry about that. 3 days without water. As we go, we'll talk about getting water, but the odds are good that you probably, even if you haven't planned out much, you can probably find yourself some water within the next 3 days. And then 3 weeks without food. Now, most people, the reality is that 10 days is where they really start to feel miserable. But the point is, you have time. Now, those are all very instant physical reactions, physical things that we need. You might be looking at this crisis that you're in and not even considering food and water. Most people, if we look at their situation, their crisis, they're going to consider it to be financial, and probably with good reason. But keep in mind that what we need to survive, what we need to live, and what we need to spend are not always directly related. It's important for me to point out that I understand that certain concerns are only going to have financial solutions. Probably a medication or a medical concern. I'm intimately aware of what a long-term prescription looks like from a personal level. But we can then separate that into a different category of needs from the more mundane financial aspects. I understand that people need medications, and that is not optional. But we don't have to lump that in with the same category as paying a bill that someone else can cover. But we'll talk about societal issues later on. It's important to remember that your physical needs and your emotional needs are not your financial needs. Now, in a crisis, people will react in different ways. You've probably heard of fight or flight. Well, you can add freeze to that if you haven't heard it before. And most people fall into one of those three categories. but that's only for the things that are immediate and are within your threshold of previous experience. You'll probably know whether or not you're a fight, flight, or freeze sort of person. In a slow burn sort of crisis, there'll be little clutch points where one of those three reactions will happen, and you'll probably get pretty used to it. Now, that's a physical reaction. And so it's important to remember that even if your reaction isn't the one you want, maybe your body is just wired a certain way, it's not the reaction of your brain. You can take that time, and then you can think your way out of it, and then you can keep moving. What does surprise people, though, is when they get to a stress point that is past, often a significant distance from their past experience. And they may find that they went from a fight person to a freeze person. It's that surprise that will cause them to not think, and it will cause them to focus on the nature of the reaction rather than what to do next. It's okay to have that fight, flight, or freeze response. Acknowledge it, consider what caused it, and then decide what to do next. Because your brain will still keep working if you make it. Now, once we know what our reaction is, once we've had our reaction, then we can decide how to move forward. In a crisis, everything is about planning as far ahead as we reasonably can, and then adapting as the plan needs to change. There will be high stress points. There will be low stress points. Humans just work on a varying scale of reactivity. We can't have no stress, because if we had no stress, we would stop, like, permanently. It's like sound. We can't have complete silence. If you've ever seen an anechoic chamber, people usually react pretty strangely in them because our body is just not designed around having no sound. We're not used to it. So we always need something keeping us moving, and that can sometimes feel like a bad thing. But if we look at it from the perspective of mechanisms which are designed to keep us alive, we can then leverage those mechanisms so that they help us rather than hinder us. The more we've had a plan, the more we might feel like we have an advantage. But the person who has planned for every eventuality has always missed something. So even if we're in the middle and we're making the plan as we go, we're possibly behind a little bit, but we're not as behind as we might think. When we're dealing with disorder, we want order. We want to move things back into an orderly fashion. What we have to remember is that if we can control something, that doesn't always mean we should. If we are only looking to control, we will control unhealthy things. We will find the easy things that we can control, and potentially that's other people. We need to be able to recognize what we can control, what we should control, and what is out of our control. By recognizing what is out of our control, we may recognize that that is something someone else can look after for us. As we move through a crisis, the people around us and being able to both help them and gain their help will make the situation a lot better. Many people struggle in a crisis to organize themselves and the people around them. Leadership in a crisis is very difficult. However, we don't need to be a leader as such. If the people around us are able to help us and we are able to help them, then as we all contribute, we can all move towards the goal. But by understanding what we should not be in control of, what is unhealthy for us to control, we can make it much easier for those other people to be able to take control of things that they should be controlling. Now, in front of us, through this whole thing, we've had a very, very simple set of tools. We have a watch, we have a Swiss Army knife, we have a Sharpie, we have a lighter, we have some string, and we have a bandana. It doesn't seem like a whole lot. And in fact, it isn't. But as we go through, we'll talk about how some simple things can make our life a lot easier, but also how to not hang off of planning, equipment, and supplies as a security blanket that is an empty comfort. So thanks for joining me. I've been Carl, and this is Calm Survival.